Hi. Looks like Russia is still not out of our news outlet. What's next?
No. The third topic today is Russia fires warning shots at a UK vessel, or did they? So, okay, so to understand this, you have to understand that Russia annexed Crimea in 2014 from the Ukraine. However, there are a lot of countries that don't recognize the Crimea water space territory as being owned by Russia. They view it as still being Ukrainian. So relationships with the Ukraine may be different than relationships with Russia. So apparently, the Russian Defense Ministry said its armed forces fired warning shots at a British destroyer violating its territorial waters near Crimea, about 3 kilometers inside that territory. Then an Su-24M, I believe they're called MiGs, aircraft dropped bombs along the path. About 30 minutes later, they left. Right, so a bunch of warning shots. They left. When they returned, the UK ship said they were innocently passing through, and no shots were fired. We experienced the ship that was shadowing us, which is common protocol, and we were made aware of training exercises in the region. Which is interesting because then the UK defense then comes out and says this is something we expected. Normal dis and misinformation from Russia trying to throw confusion. This didn't happen. It didn't happen this way. But it's important to note that the UK is among the countries that don't recognize that this annexed land is part of the Russian territory that's still part of the Ukraine, and they still have friendly relations with the UK with the Ukraine. So some analysts believe that this could have essentially been a political trip to literally just show Russia, like, we don't honor this as yours. We still think this belongs to the Ukraine. We contest it, so we're going to sail through it as is. Apparently, there have been some other events like this within the last 10 years where the UK has done similar activities. And also then denied that they ever occurred, that Russia ever fired at them, or that Russia ever chased them out of that territory. So it's really interesting to think about, who's lying, who's telling the truth. And then when you really understand how the climate of Crimea is, you can understand that it could have been a political thing. And Russia doesn't want to start a war. So they're just going to make a big show. They're going to fire warning shots. They're going to let you know, like, hey, you shouldn't be here. But actually hitting the ship is an act of war. That's that tricky spot. And, you have to think that, sailors in the UK would know that. They would say, like, we're gonna test this and see how far we can bend it before it breaks. Let you know that we're not really tolerating what we see here. So definitely an interesting story. It's definitely a lot of tension, a lot of aggression, a lot of people throwing around their political ideas, letting people know it's what we think. This is what this is how it's going to go, and definitely big changes. So happening all over the world. So at the same time, while Putin and Biden are having conversations and trying to make nice, you have like the new leader of Iran saying we're not going to do that. You have Kim Jong Un saying we're not going to come to the table talk about nuclear talks. And you have people in the UK or allies of the United States, going and encroaching upon Russian-owned territory and saying, like, we did this, what we think. So regardless of whether you think that should have been annexed or not, because you don't know the whole story, I believe there is some measure that Crimea used to be or probably belongs to Russia, and that's why it was annexed, because it should have been part of the territory. There's a history there that I do not fully understand, but that's why it's hard to make that decision. I just don't know if it's the best time in the world to go around and start, picking at people and trying to start fights. So maybe this was one of those like COVID things where, like, we've all been locked down, we haven't been paying attention, but now that we're coming back out, we're gonna let you know, like, this is how we stretch, this is
Like, we
how we
still here.
flex, and this is our birth. So very interesting. Definitely a very interesting story that caught my eye today. And it's just, anytime there's conflict between Eastern Western powers and anything with firing warning shots,
Yeah.
you that
Anytime
thing,
there's
but
firepower involved, it's like, all right, guys,
interesting.
let's not cross that line right now. We're trying to go for world peace, not really trying to look for wars right now, but these political areas of land, it's still a huge thing. So,
Right, the ownership of these territories, and it's just it's something to pay attention to. When world powers are shooting at other world powers, regardless of whether the shots are landed on board or next to it, you might want to pay attention, just because it's important to know. Because if the day comes whenever there's a war, there is a conflict, you don't want to be like, oh my god, where did that come from? Like, no, you can see the building blocks leading up to it. It's always better to know these things than to not. So big day over there for Russia today, I'll tell you.
Okay.